Good Monday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
I'm Kate Snow in for Savannah Sellers this morning. Right now on Morning News Now, Vote-A-Rama victory, a big win for President Biden and Democrats. This morning, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act now one step closer to becoming law after a marathon weekend of voting in the Senate.
It's a momentous achievement, momentous. And it's going to set our country on a path to better days ahead.
The most massive government investment in climate measures moves forward now, despite Republican opposition, with far-reaching implications for health care and taxes as well. We have team coverage this morning. Nuclear danger, a new warning as the war in Ukraine rages on. This morning, European officials sounding the alarm following a series of explosions at a Russian-controlled nuclear power plant. Why experts say the fighting could unleash a nuclear catastrophe. Grounded, turbulence before takeoff at airports across the country. This morning, hundreds of flights canceled or delayed, leaving passengers stranded. What's behind this latest round of travel troubles, plus the new efforts to resolve it? And Bama Rush backlash from Sorority Row to your For You page, a new trend on TikTok, spotlighting an old college tradition and prompting both fascination and criticism of Greek life. We'll explain the popularity of Rush talk and why one school in particular is getting the most attention. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to be here.
You have college on your mind, too, right?
I have college on my mind. The whole weekend was spent preparing my son who's going off for his freshman year of college.
How exciting.
Yes, big Target run over the weekend. Your weekend was good?
I drank whiskey, so yeah,
well,
great.
That's a
little different.
We're going to begin this morning with that big historic vote on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, Senate Democrats overcame united Republican opposition to pass the sweeping climate tax and health care package on Sunday. After a marathon overnight session, the tie-breaking vote was cast by Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, the bill is officially named the Inflation Reduction Act. It would expand health care access, bring down drug prices, and invest hundreds of billions of dollars in green energy programs, the biggest climate investment in U.S. history. Democrats say it will also reduce the deficit by $300 billion over a decade. The breakthrough gives President Biden and his party a major legislative victory, one that seemed elusive not too long ago, less than 3 months before the midterm elections. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett will have more on what it means for the Biden administration in just a moment. But first, let's bring in NBC News reporter Julie Sirkin, who helps us cover Capitol Hill. Julie, good morning. So not long ago, the Democrats' climate and tax agenda looked doomed. They struggled to get all 50 senators on the same page. How are they feeling today? What's the reaction to this big vote?
Joe, I think they're feeling pretty tired this morning. But other than that, they're feeling good about what they accomplished this weekend. And not only that, but they accomplished the guns bill, the chips bill, which gives money to semiconductors just in the last few weeks. Now, with this piece of legislation, they thought they would never get it done. Senator Manchin, Senator Schumer behind the scenes negotiating this deal that would cut down costs of prescription drugs, letting Medicare negotiate for the first time, also climate provisions and closing tax loopholes, as well. Let's take a listen to what Majority Leader Schumer had to say yesterday, and he teased that he wore his lucky blue suit for the occasion. Watch.
Every member of my caucus is elated about what happened because we've changed the world. I'm really confident that the Inflation Reduction Act will endure as one of the defining feats of the 21st century.
Senator Tina Smith also walking out of the Capitol telling us that she was so happy she could cry, coming home to tell her grandson all about it. So all in all, a big win as they head into August recess.
So, Julie, I mean, this bill survived about 16 hours of voting and all kinds of amendments. It's the so-called Vote-A-Rama. Any of those pass? What is in the final text?
Yeah, nothing that Republicans tried to squeeze Democrats into had passed, but there were two big changes made to the bill. The first one with the insulin cap, they were able to cap it for seniors over the age of 65. You're seeing on your screen there the climate and clean energy provisions. It does a lot for those in terms of trying to transition those with non-clean energy jobs to clean energy jobs, including the methane reduction program, enabling farmers and ranchers to get credits if they do reduce emissions on their farms. It also extends electric vehicle credit for people making up to $75,000 for used cars and $150,000 for new cars. It also has $4 billion for drought funding. This was huge for Senator Sinema and some of those West Coast senators that don't get a lot of rain in their states. Now, on the tax piece of this, it closes some corporate tax loopholes. Obviously, Senator Sinema massaged some of those provisions a little bit after hearing from business leaders and hedge fund managers. But all in all, Democrats are happy that they were able to take what Senator Bernie Sanders called a small but significant step forward, Joe.
It's not a done deal yet. The Senate was obviously the biggest hurdle, but the House still has to vote on it. So when can we expect that? How soon could this be on the president's desk?
The House is set to take it up on Friday. Then the president expected to sign it. It's not expected to run into any major issues in the House. They were working in pretty close contact throughout this process to make sure that that would happen. Speaker Nancy Pelosi also endorsing that. Now, meanwhile, there's already ads running in states like Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia touting this legislation. Democrats now have to make sure that voters know what they accomplished for them as they head into the midterms, hopefully with a big win.
We're going to hear a lot about it in the next 3 months. Julie Sirkin, thank you so much.
Let's go now to the White House, where President Biden applauded Senate Democrats for passing the Inflation Reduction Act, saying in a tweet that Senate Democrats voted to lower the cost of prescription drugs, health insurance, and energy, all while reducing the deficit and making the richest corporations pay their fair share. I ran to make government work, he wrote, for working families again. That's what this bill does, period. And in another bit of good news for the president, he also tested negative for COVID again yesterday. That means he ended his isolation period in the White House. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett joins us now from Washington with the latest there. Maura, we talked about the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. This is a huge victory for the president, for the Democrats, even though Republicans are already arguing it's going to hurt the economy, not help it. How significant is this for the overall Biden agenda for Democrats as those midterm elections get closer?
Well, that's the key right there, Kate. It's that the midterms are inching closer and closer, and we've been talking about for months the president's approval rating continuing to drop. A lot of uncertainty around the economy, even with the Biden administration pushing that we're in a stronger place than when he took office. They've been touting constantly that the job numbers are going up, that those gas prices going down over the last 7 weeks. But this is going to be the passage of this bill in the Senate. Hopefully, the president is hoping to push it through and sign it into law very soon. Is something that can be really key and a tangible item that the president and Democrats across the board can tout as a win going into the midterm elections and promote confidence among Democrats to continue the work that the Biden administration and Democrats in Congress have been working on.
You know, we know the president was isolating in the White House because of COVID while the Senate was negotiating all of this bill over the past week. How deeply involved was he over the weekend at other members of his administration in really getting it over the finish line?
Kate, it was a lot of behind-the-scenes work. When we saw the initial try with the Build Back Better plan, this is a very pared-down version of that, right? And so after that didn't go through last December, President Biden took a step back, but his administration, his colleagues were in close talks with Democratic lawmakers in Congress. And then as it got closer to the finish line in recent weeks, as he was isolating, we know that President Biden was on the phone very often with Senator Schumer and Manchin, as well as the National Economic Council advisor Brian Dees was in close communication with them as well. We know President Biden made several phone calls over the weekend to Democratic lawmakers to urge this to come across the finish line. And then we saw that in person, Vice President Harris made that tie-breaking vote. This is something that she, according to Chief of Staff Ron Klain, has set a record for since the early 1800s in terms of tie-breaking votes in Congress. And that just shows how hard it's been for Democrats to have these legislative wins during the Biden presidency.
Yeah, we mentioned the president tested negative for COVID. He spent the day in Delaware yesterday. He's scheduled to visit Kentucky and tour the flooding damage. What can we expect from that trip?
Yeah, he reunited with the First Lady yesterday after more than 2 weeks apart as he was isolating, and they're taking the trip together down to Kentucky this morning. They're going to meet with the governor there and tour some of those disaster zones. It's likely that we hear him touch on those climate elements of the bill that was just passed in the Senate to tout that extra, because this is a climate disaster, all of this flooding and the devastation that we've seen there. And so he'll make remarks over the weekend. He also allowed more funding from FEMA for the National Disaster Declaration to help out with this emergency. And so this is just the beginning of a week where we're going to see the president often now that he is out of isolation, making this trip to Kentucky and then expecting to sign 2 bills around manufacturing and veteran protections later this week. Kate.
Maura Barrett, thanks so much.
The former president, Donald Trump's false claims of a stolen election are continuing to have an impact on campaigns at all levels. Now, with the success of some Republican election deniers in this primary season, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard takes a look at what it could mean for the midterms and the 2024 presidential election.
There has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump.
In a new campaign ad for Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, stunning words from a former vice president, her father, Dick Cheney.
He lost his election, and he lost big. I know it, he knows it, and deep down, I think most Republicans know it.
But this week, some Republicans embracing the big lie, even running on the issue.
Donald Trump won.
Are winning. Across America, election deniers pulling off major primary victories at all levels of government. The latest, Kari Lake.
Trump won, you're right.
Winning her Republican primary for Arizona governor. Her platform, decertifying the 2020 election and arresting elections officials. Just days before the election, she claimed fraud in her own race, without specifics or evidence, knowing she may lose.
So you know about a crime, and yet you're not reporting it to authorities.
And I'm not telling you about it.
But she won and promptly declared victory. Lake joins a cadre of other election-denying candidates for governor in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Maryland. Each would be responsible for certifying their state's 2024 presidential results. And this Tuesday, potentially another in all-important Wisconsin.
We are going to have election integrity here in Wisconsin.
Trump's pick is running against a Republican endorsed by former Vice President Mike Pence. Since certifying Biden's 2020 win on January 6th, increasingly a target of scorn.
A guy that we used to like, named Mike Pence, endorsed Karen Robeson.
Republicans also nominating election-denying Secretary of State candidates and attorneys general.
I will fight to secure our elections so that when Donald Trump runs and wins again in 2024, everyone will know it's legitimate.
Trump allies also winning key U.S. Senate primaries in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Georgia, Missouri, Nevada, North Carolina, and Arizona.
If you had been in the U.S. Senate, would you have objected to the 2020 certification?
You know, I think what Hawley and I believe what Cruz did was right.
Michigan Congressman Peter Meyer voted to impeach Trump after the Capitol attack. This week, he lost to a Trump-backed challenger, John Gibbs.
Any leader of any organization has to have a certain amount of loyalty from the people that work in that organization.
And in just 10 days,
the people of Wyoming are going to tell her, Liz, you're fired. Get out of here.
Liz Cheney's political fate on the line. The co-chair of the January 6th committee, who has made the case against the former president, is facing off against a Trump-endorsed Republican.
We're fed up with the January 6th commission.
Their messages mired in 2020, but with potential 2024 chaos-causing implications.
Thanks to Vaughn Hilliard for that report. Of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach former President Trump in 2021, 6 have either retired or lost their primary elections to a Trump-backed challenger.
Let's go to the war in Ukraine now, where there is growing alarm over explosions at a nuclear power plant under Russian military control. The blasts are igniting a blame game between both countries, Russia and Ukraine, and worries about nuclear catastrophe. NBC correspondent Morgan Chesky has the latest.
Global alarm over explosions at Europe's largest nuclear power plant, now operating under Russian control. The weekend rocket attack destroying high-voltage wires, forcing Ukrainian workers to limit output at one of the plant's 6 reactors. Ukraine says the risk of hitting the Zaporizhzhia plant, nearly twice the size of Chernobyl, is allowing Russia to shell cities without retaliation. Ukraine's president outraged.
This is the largest nuclear power plant on our continent, and any shelling of this factory is an open, brazen crime, an act of terror.
But Russia released this video today, claiming to show damage inflicted by Ukrainian forces. Nearby shelling so intense, inspectors fear they can't assess the damage. NBC's Josh Letterman spoke to the head of Ukraine's nuclear energy company.
Is there a risk of a major nuclear incident?
For sure. This only depends on where it will be actually pointed.
He says should a rocket strike the wrong place, it could be a radiation catastrophe. Meanwhile, volunteers in the city of Poltava helping equip Ukrainian soldiers. Katarina Ovcharenko and her team weaving special camouflage for frontline fighters. Anything to give an edge.
So you're not just handing out food and first aid kits, you're making silencers right here in Poltava.
Yes.
And this is given to a Ukrainian sniper or someone on the front lines?
Yes, for free.
For free?
Yes, for free.
I can imagine the waiting list for one of these.
Yeah, we have quite a lot of people waiting for this stuff.
Ukraine says at least one employee was injured in an explosion Saturday when they were struck by shrapnel. But officials stress all reactors appear to be operational, and as of right now, there's no leak in radiation.
Oh, that's good news. Morgan, thank you.
Now to the travel headaches that many Americans are still facing across the country. Over the weekend, more than 1,500 domestic flights were canceled, with thousands more delayed, all leaving passengers from coast to coast scrambling to reschedule their getaways. NBC News senior national correspondent Carrie Sanders is at the Fort Lauderdale airport with more. Carrie, good morning.
Well, good morning, Joe. Passengers say, especially those who travel a lot, that this routine is becoming far too common, where they get to the airport and then the flight is either delayed for hours or outright canceled. The airline analysts say this is a combination of summertime weather plus the staffing shortages, which are creating a perfect storm for what turns out to be a travel nightmare. This morning, frustration is on the rise at airports across the country.
I just don't understand how this is okay.
With more than 1,500 flights canceled this weekend and at least 13,000 delays from coast to coast.
Hopefully it doesn't get canceled again, because I definitely need to get home and get stuff done.
Nasty storms setting off a cascade of chaos for travelers.
It was just really draining and frustrating.
American and Southwest Airlines blaming summertime thunderstorms and weather-related challenges for the disruptions. But it's been a rocky summer for airlines, dealing with crew and pilot shortages, reduced flight schedules, and a record surge in travelers.
There aren't a lot of pilots sitting in reserve. There aren't a lot of planes sitting in reserve, or crew or staff. And so when there's one cancellation, there's very little buffer or slack in the system.
Sarah Johnson was rebooked from New York to Chicago with her two sons, who were put on a different flight on another day. The airline was able to resolve the issue, and they all traveled home together.
It's a broken system, and then people get left having no idea where to go, what to do, no answers, and no compensation.
Now the Department of Transportation is proposing new guidelines for travelers hit with flight delays, including allowing passengers a refund if an airline changes their departure or arrival time by at least 3 hours for a domestic flight.
I think if it's enacted, it would be the biggest expansion of travelers' rights in decades.
If those customers' rights were enacted in the United States, they would somewhat reflect what already exists in Europe. The Department of Transportation is taking comments over the next 90 days. Joe?
All right, Carrie, thank you so much.
Kind of like that idea of getting your money back if it's 3 hours. Let's get to the morning weather now, and that lasting heat wave that is still affecting millions of people.
Yeah, Michelle Grossman joins us with that. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Kate. And yeah, we're seeing 55 million Americans under a heat alert from the Pacific Northwest to the Mississippi Valley, parts of the St. Louis metro area, and also the Northeast. We're looking at temperatures once again into the 90s, into the 100s. It's going to feel like 110 in some spots with the high humidity in place, too. But we're going to see that humidity wiped away later on this week. Also that heat in the Northeast, but it is hot today. 92 degrees in New York City this afternoon, feeling like 98 once you factor in that humidity. Little Rock, you're going to feel like 104. Dallas feeling like 101 again. And we're looking at Atlanta, your heat index this afternoon at 93. The heat is on tomorrow, so that relentless heat does continue. Temperatures once again into the 90s, feeling like 100 degrees in Memphis, also Jackson. It's going to feel like 102 in Raleigh. Look at Philadelphia, feeling like 104 tomorrow. But we do have a cold front that we're watching. That's going to bring relief later in the week. So feeling much better by Wednesday in New York City. just 84 degrees, the low 80s by Friday. And the biggest difference, we're going to have really low dew points, so it's going to feel really comfortable. In Erie, Pennsylvania, temperatures feeling fall-like into the 70s, 75 by Friday. Chicago into the 70s as well. So this is a cold front that I'm talking about. It's moving very, very slowly. It's going to take a while to make its way towards the east. And in the meantime, we're going to see some very heavy downpours. Where you see those darker colors, the yellows, the reds, the oranges, that's where we're seeing those summer downpours that Carrie was talking about. That could certainly impact travel today. Parts of the Midwest, the Great Lakes, into the interior Northeast. And we're also concerned about flash flooding. So we do have a flash flood risk. You can see numerous spots across the country from the Southwest into portions of the Mississippi Valley, the Great Lakes, the Midwest, into the Northeast. And we could see 1, 2, 3 inches of rain in some of these spots, and really fast with those summertime downpours, torrential downpours. And we're concerned also about those flood-ravaged areas where we're looking at eastern Kentucky, also West Virginia, Tennessee. You can see those darker colors. So we could see 2 inches of rain in those spots over the next 2 days. And we do have showers in the forecast in those spots through Thursday. So that's something we're going to watch very closely. And then, guys, I'll end it here. We are watching the potential for our next tropical depression. It's been pretty quiet so far, knock on wood, but we are looking at the potential for development over the next 5 days into a tropical depression.
All right. I love how your graphic said a touch cooler. We will take a touch cooler right now. All right.
We'll take any touch, yeah.
Exactly. All right. Thanks, Michelle. A growing political battle is brewing between Texas Governor Greg Abbott and New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Dozens of migrants arrived in New York on a charter bus this weekend, sent there from Texas by Governor Abbott. Abbott's office claims New York is now a designated drop-off location for migrants, a sharp pushback against President Biden's immigration policy. This is not the first time he has done this. Abbott has bused hundreds of immigrants to Washington, D.C. as well. But it's the migrants caught in the middle who will be impacted the most. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa has the latest.
Thousands of asylum seekers are caught in the political crosshairs between conservative border states and progressive big cities, and the busloads of proof show no signs of slowing down. Driven by bus and fueled by politics, another wave of migrants arrived in New York City.
Merecemos una oportunidad.
More than 4,000 have come since May, a metaphorical message from Texas Governor Greg Abbott. New York's mayor is furious, saying shelters are already overrun.
Placing on the bus with no direction to come here.
Abbott is adamant border states are done shouldering America's immigration crisis after May saw a record 239,000 illegal crossings. The governor slammed President Biden Friday for refusing to do his job and called New York a sanctuary city, the ideal destination for migrants, adding he also sent 5,500 to Washington, D.C. That city's mayor pleading for federal aid.
And we need our National Guard. If we were a state, I would have already done it.
The feds denied that request, adding to the chaos faulty paperwork. According to our New York station, WNBC, one migrant claiming an immigration and customs enforcement officer in Texas gave him government documents showing a made-up address, phone number, and a smiley face instead of a signature. ICE vowing to investigate, adding it takes allegations of inappropriate behavior very seriously.
What kind of an impact is that having?
Well, that can have a very devastating impact because they may miss notices to appear in court, to check in with immigration officials.
Meanwhile, families are caught in the fray. Ruben, his wife, and 4 kids fled Colombia and nearly drowned crossing the border.
Como llegar a suelo americano, le di gracias a Dios por la oportunidad.
Thousands seeking asylum met with divisive politics and loaded bus tickets. New York's mayor adding his office was told this latest busload was supposed to arrive with 40 migrants on board, but it showed up with just 14. And now he's worried people are lost in other cities along that route. At the same time, among those who have come to New York, the mayor says a lot of them have said they wanted to go to other cities, but they were ordered onto that bus. Back to you.
All right, Maggie Vespa, thank you. This morning, a ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad appears to be holding in Gaza following 3 days of cross-border fighting.
Israel unleashed a wave of surprise airstrikes on Friday and continued to bomb the Palestinian enclave throughout the weekend. Israel's military called it a, quote, preemptive attack targeting members of Islamic Jihad. Palestinian health officials say 44 people were killed, among them 15 children. The militant group responded by firing rockets toward Israel, most of which were intercepted. NBC News foreign correspondent Kelly Kobiella joins us now for more on this. Kelly, start off by walking us through the events of the last few days. What has Israel said about why they launched those airstrikes on Friday? What's the aftermath in Gaza like?
Well, Israel says that they launched this strike on Friday because they had evidence of a concrete threat against against tanks in Israel, that there was going to be some sort of an attack, cross-border attack on tanks in Israel. So they launched this preemptive strike targeting senior officials with Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now, just to be clear, this is a separate group from Hamas, the ruling party, and the group, the militant group that often has gotten into skirmishes, some 4 conflicts with Israel over the past 15 years. The last, of course, was last year, and it lasted 11 days and absolutely devastated Gaza. Now, since then, Israel has tried to incentivize Hamas to not join conflicts like this, to not escalate by offering making available 12,000 work permits for Palestinians, for people who live in Gaza, to cross over into Israel and work. And what people were really keeping an eye on over the past couple of days was whether or not Hamas was going to join in this conflict. Hundreds of rockets were fired at Israel, but it appears as though Hamas did not join in, and most of those rockets that were lobbed toward Israel did not hit their targets. The Israeli defense system protecting targets in Israel. But, Kate, of course, the impact on Gaza, as always, was tremendous. A place where that is home to about 2.3 million people, one of the poorest places on earth, very high unemployment rates, and really desperate for work, for food, for electricity. So the people of Gaza really bearing the brunt of this over the weekend.
Kelly, let's talk about last night's ceasefire. How did it come about, and is there a feeling that it can hold?
Well, I think going back to this point that Hamas did not join in this conflict, there is optimism that the ceasefire will hold. It was brokered by Egypt, and part of this deal, included in the deal, was that Egypt would try to work for the release of a Palestinian Islamic Jihad prisoner held in Israel. Now, whether or not that person is released at some point is sort of in question. But again, it goes back to this idea of Hamas not wanting to escalate because it is not in its interest to escalate. Those work permits are crucial for Hamas's economy. Egypt and Qatar are both helping to rebuild Gaza after that war last year. So really, the hope is that the ceasefire will hold because Hamas, frankly, wants it to hold. The border crossings have been partially reopened today to allow for fuel to go back into Gaza so that its one power plant can fire back up and provide electricity to the people there, and also to supply some humanitarian relief. Joe, Kate.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Welcome back. There are new developments this morning surrounding the death of Ahmaud Arbery, the unarmed black man who was gunned down while jogging in a Georgia neighborhood. The 3 men convicted in his death on state charges are now headed back to court today to face sentencing for federal hate crimes. Each of the men now faces the possibility of an additional life sentence for chasing down and ultimately killing Arbery because of his race. A jury convicted them of federal hate crimes earlier this year. Now a U.S. district judge will decide their fate in back-to-back hearings, beginning with Travis McMichael, the man who pulled the trigger. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now to break down today's proceedings. Danny, good morning to you. So given the fact that these men are already serving life sentences that were handed down by a jury months ago, what's the significance of today's sentencing?
It's more than symbolic because those state sentences could be appealed and theoretically could be overturned. So Is it overkill? Not really, because those state sentences, if somehow one of the defendants wins an appeal and those sentences go away or they win a new trial, then the remaining federal sentence will adequately serve to punish them for their violations of civil rights, which are somewhat different from the underlying state crime.
So, Danny, in a court filing last week, the McMichaels asked the judge to have their federal time take precedence over their state time. First of all, why would they want to do that when they're now facing the possibility of another life sentence? Is that a normal request?
First, it is a smart request because Georgia state prisons are not pleasant places to be. And the reality is federal prisons are not much better, but they are likely better than a Georgia state prison, especially in a state where these defendants are known for having committed what is now known to be a race crime. They're not going to be very popular in a Georgia state prison in general population. Now, the other question is, can the federal judge even do this? And the answer is not really. In the United States, the sovereignty, the state or federal government who first obtains jurisdiction over the defendant gets to keep them. It's like finders keepers rule. So because Georgia prosecuted these defendants first, they have first jurisdiction over their sentence. And they can keep them until they're completed their state sentence. So the federal judge here doesn't really have that much power. In fact, when it comes to where a defendant serves his sentence, a federal judge can only really make a recommendation as to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So his power is even more circumscribed when it comes to telling a state court or a state prison what to do.
Danny, this is actually the first time in Georgia's history when a conviction has been handed down for a federal hate crime. How surprising is that? What was it about this case, you think, that made it so historic?
The high-profile nature of it and the video evidence. I mean, that is what's changing all of these cases. And it started changing them roughly 10 years ago, maybe a little more. But as the cell phone cameras become more and more ubiquitous, these are the kinds of things we're increasingly going to see, because no longer will it be a case of he said, she said. It will be video evidence of what happened. And that's really what convicted these defendants. And amazingly, video shot by one of the defendants himself led to this conviction.
Danny Savalos, thanks for your expertise this morning. We appreciate it.
Health officials in New York State are concerned a recent polio case in a county not far from New York City may be just the tip of the iceberg. Officials say wastewater samples detected the virus in another nearby county, meaning hundreds of others could also be infected. Joining us now is NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Happy Monday morning, Dr. Patel. Thanks for being with us. First off, how concerned should we be about polio and a resurgence here in New York or even across the nation?
Kate, we should be very concerned considering that the disease and that the virus was considered eradicated for purposes of human disease about 22 years ago. So that is very concerning. It's a sign of low vaccination rates. Even New York State has an average of 79.1% vaccination when we have vaccines that can completely prevent this.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how does it spread? But it sounds like vaccines are kind of the critical thing. And just a reminder, because it is such an older disease, what are the symptoms? What do we even look for?
Yeah, it's an older disease, and it's one that, to be candid, only I've seen a handful of times, and it's been in these incredibly rare cases. I've seen it outside of the U.S. But the common symptoms that we should be looking for are symptoms that can look very general in the beginning, kind of fever, fatigue, nausea. This is something that has a tendency in the classic medical textbooks to cause stiffness in the limbs and kind of a stiffness in the neck. That's how you hear about polio being presented, decades ago. But this is something that we should just be aware of, particularly if you know that you have not been vaccinated or that you're young ones. Children under 5 are the ones that are the most susceptible. That's why we hear about this in children and cases that we look for in children. But be clear, Kate, this is something that should just make everybody do a refresh. Hey, did I miss any of my children's vaccinations? Do I need to check my vaccine record with my pediatrician or with our doctor?
And it's not too late if you missed a polio vaccine, can you make it up?
Yeah, there's definitely the ability to catch up. Yes, absolutely. Okay. So I do think it's good news all around. This is not something that people have to worry about if they have been vaccinated, but it is something, again, because of low vaccination rates, people missing vaccine appointments, people being concerned about vaccines. because of misinformation, I think this is a good conversation to start up again.
And, you mentioned that this is so rare that we haven't had a case since 2013. The last case before that was, I think, 1979. So given that there might be a resurgence going on, do we have any other new tools beyond vaccines to fight polio?
Unfortunately, we do not have treatments for polio. So I think that's the critical piece here, is that we have some supportive therapies. But, if we're looking for something that you can give to somebody once they've been diagnosed beyond supportive care, we're really limited. And that's because, again, we thought that it was eradicated. And for all purposes, for the majority of America and the majority of the world, it is eradicated. But we've seen this resurgence. And a reminder that this resurgence has been largely found, again, unvaccinated people. And I think that this is important. It's probably not just New York State, because we have seen pockets of unvaccinated children in other parts of the country as well.
Dr. Kavita Patel, always great to have you. Thanks so much.
We're back with the latest installment in our ongoing series, Priced Out, where we take a closer look at the challenges that many Americans are facing with a housing market that's high in price and low in supply.
It's an issue traditionally reported on the coast, in and around big cities. But as CNBC's Seema Modi explains, it is now causing heartache in the heartland.
Katie Speets and Paul Cushman are desperate.
2 years has gone by, and now we're realizing that no matter what we do to change our process, it's a lot harder than we thought.
A little bit on that. They want to get married, but first are hoping to buy a house. The couple have their eye on Sheboygan, Wisconsin and the surrounding area.
Business guy.
They moved in with Paul's mother to save money.
All I'm seeing is a bunch of lots.
Trying to be competitive, but all of their offers so far rejected, and a market short on inventory.
Even seeing a house within an hour, it's already gone.
Why is Sheboygan becoming such an attractive place to move to?
Yeah, well, not only is Sheboygan the Malibu of the Midwest, we're also one of the strongest manufacturing communities in the country.
Mayor Ryan Sorensen campaigned on the promise of addressing the housing problem.
The lack of housing and housing stock and affordable housing keeps me up at night. A lot of our business partners are looking at growing and expanding, and they've asked us that, hey, we need more housing so we can employ more folks.
And the housing crisis is not confined to Sheboygan. Different studies show a massive shortage of housing, estimates ranging from 1.6 million to more than 5 million housing units in the U.S. It's happening in places across the Midwest and South. A new analysis shows metro areas like Wichita, Kansas, Muskegon, Michigan, and Decatur, Alabama were well stocked in 2012, but by 2019 had housing shortages.
And then you have 2 extra bedrooms here.
Wisconsin builder Bob Werner says the ongoing labor shortage is slowing down his ability to provide more inventory.
It's easy for us to add a carpenter or two, but unless I really add enough electricians and plumbers and excavators and all those other trades have enough people to build the houses, I can't add more houses.
This is all new construction. 15 months into his tenure, Mayor Sorensen is still chipping away at his campaign promise.
The city just recently purchased 200 acres of farmland on the far south side so that we can build and grow our housing stock in the community.
But developments like that will take time. Paul and Katie are looking now.
2-3 bedroom, 1 to 2 bathrooms. That's about it. That's all we want.
Hoping to get their slice of the American dream. Seema Modi, NBC News, Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
All right, more financial headlines now. Billionaire Elon Musk wants to debate Twitter's CEO as he fights back against his original deal to buy the company.
NBC's Silvana Heno joins us now with that and other news. Good morning, Silvana.
Hey guys, good morning. Yeah, Elon Musk is challenging Twitter's CEO to a public debate over how the social media platform counts fake accounts and spam bots. Musk made the challenge in a series of tweets in response to comments about his countersuit against Twitter over the attempt to walk away from his $44 billion deal to buy the company. Musk has claimed Twitter failed or refused to provide him with information on fake accounts. Twitter has sued, demanding a court force the deal to go through. The trial is set for October. Demand for grocery delivery is cooling off as food prices are rising. Some shoppers are shifting to less expensive grocery pickup, while others are back to shopping in stores. Experts say grocery delivery saw 5 years of growth in just the first 3 months of the pandemic, but that's dropped by a quarter since. Analysts say it's hard to get a delivery premium below $10 because of fuel and labor costs. Video game and console makers are having a tough go of it lately. Sales for the big three, Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, slid in the second quarter of this year as tailwinds from the pandemic are fading. Overall, Americans spent $12.4 billion on games this spring. That's down 13% from a year ago. Several factors are to blame, specifically the global semiconductor chip shortage and the fact that people are going out more instead of staying at home and playing games, guys.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're going outside.
Yeah, we're going out. Exactly. I do not want to stay inside.
Come winter, maybe the video games will bounce back.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Thanks, Ivana.
Welcome back. All right, here's a competition that has really, forgive me, gone to the dogs. The 2022 World Dog Surfing Championship, yes, was held near San Francisco on Saturday. The dogs are judged on a number of criteria, including the length of the ride, technique, confidence, and the size or strength of the wave. Despite the fun nature of the event, the dogs are actually trained in this sport. It's not a joke, and they pull off some really impressive moves out on the water. The event also had mobile pet adoptions, a dog costume contest, and Yappy Hour, Joe. Yappy Hour. All right, there they are.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that I could train.
There we go.
I was thinking I could train my dog Bowie maybe to do this. He loves the water. That's Bowie. He absolutely loves running and jumping and catching a ball and then bringing it back over and over and over and over.
Does Bowie have good balance?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I've never tried anything like that. Look, there he goes, bounding after the ball.
Give it a shot. Bring a camera.
We have put him on our kayak. We have a kayak that we go out on, so he has balanced on the kayak. So yeah,
he's a natural. Bowie's a natural. All right.
But apparently it's a real sport. I just said they trained for this.
I know, it's amazing. So Bowie next year. Bowie 2023.
Okay.
All right. The start of college is not just an exhilarating time for thousands of incoming students. It's also attracting the attention of TikTokers around the world, and it centers around a hashtag, Rush Talk.
That is where sorority hopefuls document their experience going through the traditional Greek life process of rushing, getting to know the on-campus sororities with the hope that they're invited to join.
For more on this, we're joined by NBC News youth and internet culture reporter Callan Rosenblatt. Callan says some fans have referred to this is not my quote, as the NFL draft for women. Take us through what exactly this is and why it's so popular.
I'm cringing.
Yeah, so Rush Talk, we had this trend last year. It's back this year, potentially going to be bigger than ever. Rush Talk is essentially where the women of University of Alabama are posting what they're wearing to themed events, what they're wearing to meet potential sororities. And they sort of take you through step by step this culture that some of us who have never been in Greek life have never seen before. So there's this sort of reality TV nature to this. People will pick, the girls that they're rooting for, who they think is, maybe a villain, who, they assign these sort of titles to all these young women who they don't know and will probably never meet, but are sharing these experiences on TikTok. And it's a lot of fun, hopefully pretty harmless. And in a few weeks, they find out what sorority these PNMs or potential new members will be joining.
So the University of Alabama seems to be far and away the most popular one, right, for this phenomenon on TikTok. Why them? What did they just start it?
Well, yes, University of Alabama is far and away the most popular university. And I've spoken with a few people who are following Rush Talk and who are really obsessed with it. One person even creating a spreadsheet to keep track of everyone. And they said Southern sorority culture is, among the most interesting. It's some of the universities that go the most out, that do the most, events or go the hardest for these kinds of events. And so there is this real fascination. It's really different than, sorority life in any other, part of the country. I've talked to people who went to sororities in the Northeast, in the Midwest, all the way out on the West Coast. And they said there's nothing quite like Southern sorority culture. And so people just can't look away. And I think that's why University of Alabama has been so incredibly popular both last year and again this year.
I mean, Callan, they're so popular, some of the young women are actually becoming public figures on social media for the first time. Everyone is not on board with this, understandably. Talk about some of the pushback.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, there is one woman who even created a spreadsheet of these women who are publicly posting. And some of the people have said, they're not cool with that these are young women who are not in a reality show. They're just posting on TikTok. However, you know, this person is, again, just kind of wanting to follow along like everyone else. And so there is a sort of question, like, are we too obsessed with the lives of people who are just posting and are not trying to become public figures? I spoke with a couple experts who said, as long as you're not like harassing someone, as long as it's not like a couch guy situation where like you're investigating every facet of this person's life that you don't know, and you're not sort of causing harm to their life, it's all in good fun. And if you're publicly posting, this is something you should be aware could happen, that people could become enamored with your content. So just to keep that in mind when you post, that is always a possibility.
Always important to keep in mind when you're putting yourself out there so
Yeah,
publicly like
I'm
that.
struggling as a mom here,
Yeah,
right?
I was about to send the kid to
fun.
college.
I'm sending my kid to college, a boy to college soon, but like it sounds really fun, but also superficial and, you know, sort of scary. But yeah, I get it though. I get it.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
absolutely.
Thank you. We're going to end, speaking of moms, we're going to end this hour with a really touching story about the power of love between a mom and her child, and one son who gave his mom an incredible gift during one of the hardest moments of her life.
Look at that hair, huh? That's actually really cool.
This is so much more than just a hair appointment for Melanie Sheahay.
Hey, Matt Sheahay.
It's a moment years in the making, all thanks to her son, Matt.
Oh, it was absolutely remarkable.
For nearly 20 years, Melanie has been battling a benign brain tumor. 4 years ago, she started radiation treatment, which caused her to lose all her hair.
My hair is not going to return.
The tumor and the treatment took not just a physical toll, but an emotional one as well.
It was hard. I don't mind being sick, but I do mind looking sick.
I could tell that the most recent radiation kind of took a toll on her. She would make more comments on her appearance.
That's when an idea came to him, when his family was commenting that he needed a haircut.
I jokingly said, well, what if I just kept growing it to make a wig for you, Mom? And then it clicked.
It took 2 years for Matt to go from this to this, growing an extra 12 inches of hair.
It was a no-brainer for a mom like her. Absolute no-brainer.
Oh, man.
This March, it was time to take it all off, as Melanie looked on.
Never expected it to mean as much as it did to me. When it happened, when we had cut it off, it was very real. It was very emotional.
What were the feelings?
It's just so emotional that he went 2 years and gave a gift like that. Sorry. It's very emotional, very touching. We love you. So we'll see you to bed.
They sent it off, and weeks later, a wig came back. It had been nearly 5 years since Melanie had been to a hairstylist.
When you saw yourself with the wig on, what did you think? Knowing it's Matt's hair, you know, it was really spectacular.
My mother has given everything for me growing up, and this is giving such a small thing back, you know, compared to what she's given me in life.
For his mom, there was nothing small about this gift.
It's such a great gift to have your son see you with compassion, you know what you needed. That feels lovely, to be loved and seen that way.
She made me cry when we were talking. So since her hair is not going to come back because of this condition that she has, Matt actually said to me that he's ready to grow it out all over again if she needs another wig, because they wear out after a while.
That is so sweet.
Yeah,
I love to see that.
sweet.
Thank you for bringing us that story. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.